Hello, I'm Dr. Rob Furman, your host for the Post-Apocalyptic Classroom. Today we're talking about grades and the pandemic. This is something that's been bothering me for a while now. It seems like we're having a problem with maybe a grade inflation or just inaccurate grading in general. The reason this is becoming a problem is because when we looked through halfway through the year, we started to notice that the grades were not truly reflecting the assessment and what our kids can and can't do. Now, any of you that have followed any of my previous presentations, especially the one, Are You Future Ready? And my book, Are You Future Ready? You know that I have a problem with grades. I always have. I don't think a random letter chosen, all because we picked the first 5 letters in the alphabet, has really nothing to do with what they mean. If I'd say, hey, you got a C, good job. Or, hey, you got a C, bad job. Does that really tell me what I know and what I don't know? What does a C mean? So you got some of the content. Is that enough to move on? Is it enough to hold you back? Do you know enough to keep going? You got a B. You got a little more than the average person, but still not as much as everybody else. Again, so arbitrary and really doesn't tell me anything about, does my kid know how to do division, whatever the case may be. So I've always had a problem with grades to begin with, and now more than ever, it just seems so problematic. And I think a lot of our problem is due to the historical nature of grading. We have parents who grew up through this grading system. An A means everything, a C or a D is not so good, and an F is horrible, right? But it never really says, did my kid master this content? X objective. Can they do it or can't they do it? Obviously, I'm a proponent of standards-based report cards because that tells me my kid's got this or they don't have it and they need more help. But we're dealing with parents now more than ever as being the teacher, right? Kids that are at home going through cyber programs. All of a sudden, these kids who traditionally were struggling, kids that maybe had extra interventions, IEPs, maybe Title I program, whatever the case may be, and all of a sudden, they're acing everything. Now, if that's the case and the parents have some sort of magic bullet, first of all, please share it with us. And second of all, that's wonderful. Not a problem. But how do we know for sure? Obviously, the first thing that comes to mind is, well, test them. In theory, that's good too. But then how do we test them? How are we going to test them if they're taking the tests at home? We've tried a couple times to say, let's bring them into the school. That's wonderful too. But there's usually a reason why the kids are in cyber programs, a concern over the pandemic. So you see our problem. You see where we are. So the question is, what do we do about this? How do we handle a situation where major tests, possibly even benchmark tests, are being given at home, and what we assume the child should be able to do, just based on our own experiences as teachers, is not adding up with the grades they're receiving? I'm a parent. I have several children in my world, and I get it. I totally get it. Nobody wants to see their child do poorly. And I'm not for a second insinuating that a parent is doing the work, although that could be happening in some instances. But more so, I think the parent is sitting there with their child, doing the proper thing, helping them, being at their side, making them work on the tests and homework assignments and activities. But when they see them give a wrong answer, especially on a test, they're probably more apt to go, ooh, Johnny, you might want to look at that one again. Or, Johnny, whoa, look at this. You're missing this number. Or, Johnny, I don't want you to do badly. Check this out again. Look, pay attention to this. Aren't those all possibilities with good intention? That's probably the hardest part, the hardest pill to swallow is I don't think anybody's doing this out of malice. I think they're doing it because they love their children and they want to see them be successful. But it's becoming a problem because now what we have kids that have wonderful grades. They have A's, oh boy, but yet they don't know the content. And we're seeing this time and time again now, more so obviously than ever before. So what are we going to do about it? Isn't that the ultimate question? What are we going to do about it? I guess my first question to you is, are you seeing this in your district? If you're a school employee, are you seeing this? If you're a parent listening to this podcast, are you doing this? Again, no ill intent, but are you doing this? Do you feel maybe you're skewing the scores a little bit? If you are, leave comments below and let's start that conversation as well, because I would love to know how we're going to take care of this situation. I have a few thoughts, obviously, right? That's why you're listening to my podcast, and, well, I like to talk a lot. So I have a few thoughts on this. My first thought is we have to reach out to the parents. We have to communicate with the parents and somehow, in a very, very delicate manner, say, we love the fact that you want to see your children succeed. But sometimes, in order to grow, they may have to fail. And boy, is that a tough pill to swallow, isn't it? That's a hard one. I get it. That is a hard one. But in order for us to assess where they are, we have to somehow, in some form or fashion, get an accurate data mark, right? I think that's our end goal. The end goal here is, regardless of how we get there, we have to find some way to get an accurate data mark. So I think the first thing we have to do, obviously, is communicate with the parents. Explain to them the importance of this. Explain to them that you think you're helping, and we get that. We totally understand that. But what happens if they move on to the next grade level and they pretty much have maybe less than half of the content from the previous grade under their belt? And understand it. We're setting them up for failure now. And again, no ill intent. The parents probably aren't thinking of it that way. But that's exactly what's happening. I have students that have Title I services that are all of a sudden acing English and language arts. How is that possible? So, I guess the next thing we need to consider is, how are we going to get that positive data mark? Tip number 1, communicate with the parents. Have that conversation. And it's not going to be one conversation, and it's not going to necessarily have to be a letter. I don't think letters do it for this type of thing, because how often do they look at the main heading of the email and like, okay, school, get it, fine, and don't really digest it. I think it needs to be almost like a town hall type of meeting. Here's our problem. What are we going to do to be successful with these kids? How are we going to fix this problem? You may catch a few that way. Tip number 2, if possible, this might not be, but if possible, try to get them in. Try to get the kids in a safe, healthy way, maybe 1 or 2 at a time, socially distant, with masks, the whole 9 yards, and give some sort of assessment. Now, that gets tricky because, like I said, parents obviously don't want their kids in the building right now because of nerves and the pandemic. So that's going to be a tougher sell. But it'll at least give you an accurate point. And we have to do it now. We're halfway through the year, a little better than halfway through the year. We have to do this now in order to have that conversation for the entire second half of the year. If that doesn't work, tip number 3, you're probably going to have to go for the old Zoom, right? I love how we call video conferencing Zoom now. But we're probably going to have to go that route where the kid is taking the assessment and you're watching them. It was interesting. I was doing a professional development for our state here in Pennsylvania not too long ago, and they had a video monitor turned on, and they were recording me taking the test, like just staring at me, staring at the screen, taking a test. And I was always thinking to myself, oh, that's so foolish. Well, now I kind of get why they do that, because you almost have to be able to validate that no one else is around you, no one else is giving you the answers. I always thought that would just sort of be expected of a professional, but I get it now. And again, not because they want to do something devious or anything like that. Well, maybe with the adult version, but with the kids, I don't think they do. But it's still the same result is happening. The kids are getting grades that they don't earn. So maybe we go that route. Maybe we take a Zoom meeting and you put 2 or 3 kids, 4 kids on your screen, have them take the test in advance, tell the parents, we do not want to see the parent in the screen. We don't want to hear the parent in the screen. There should be no audio available, so that we know we're at least getting a slightly better version of what the kids know and can be able to do. The next problem becomes, well, tip number 4. It's actually more of a problem. We have benchmark tests and they are online and they can take them online. Maybe there's a way that we do a similar setup where we have small groups coming in and we give a larger benchmark test. And then we have that conversation with the parents. Or another option would be, one of my teachers is doing this, she's doing one-on-one live interactive testing. So she's giving the question and the student has to give her the answer verbally back. And then she dictates the response herself. Easier for ELA and things like that, maybe a little more difficult for math, but that seems to be somewhat effective right now. Is the child will read a story to her and she'll dictate information. It's sort of an unorthodox way of doing a test, but we're getting results because she at least can, in her mind, know where we are or where that child is in terms of that skill. That seems to be working as well. But I think out of all of this, out of everything we're discussing, all of these potential ways of getting an accurate assessment on a child, I still find there's 2 overarching problems here. One, the idea that grades are so important. That to me is always been a problem and will continue to be a problem. And maybe this pandemic is a way for us to take a realistic outlook on what are grades and what do they mean. Because the older generation, the parental generation right now, they're so concerned about getting the correct letter that they're missing the big picture. Does my kid even know this stuff? We're not teaching them skills so that they get the letter. We're teaching them skills because they're going to need these skills for the rest of their life. So what good is it to fake a letter grade, to say, little Johnny got his A? I remember when stores used to give free ice cream if you brought an A in. Well, my Lord, one way or the other, we're getting that A, right? But that's so not important now. Yes, you get your 5-minute ice cream, but if you didn't learn that skill, boy, you're going to have trouble moving forward, aren't you? That seems like to be a bigger problem right now. And then the other problem is going to be, I don't see cyber programs going away. I think they're wonderful. So ultimately, we do have to create some sort of system to be able to honor what the kids are learning or not learning. We have to be able to find a way to consistently monitor and assess these students despite being at home, despite getting potential help. It seems to actually be a sort of an age-old problem, right? I mean, it's a good problem to have. Parents want to see their kids succeed. That's not a bad thing, is it? But it is whenever we get to a situation where we're not able to say, what has the child learned? And then the biggest question, the hardest question, which brings up an entire other episode, more than likely, on the post-apocalyptic classroom is, now that they have these letter grades, and they've gotten A's across the board, but they have maybe one assessment that says, wow, this kid doesn't know any of this stuff, even though they've been getting A's all year long. Do we move them on to the next grade level? Boy, is that going to be a hard one. Because the problem is this. Again, generationally and historically through education, you move up almost more based on your age than what you know and don't know. Again, another problem that I've discussed many times through the Are You Future Ready presentation. Why are we moving kids along just based on their age? You've put a year in on this planet, which means you must know more, so we move you on. That doesn't really work either anymore, because there's so much to learn. Kids are getting pushed on without having the fundamentals that they need to. And now, this year, more than ever, we're really going to have a hard time with that. Because I can almost guarantee you're going to have kids that have grades that say they should absolutely move on. But when you look at the skills and what they've actually learned, it's going to say quite the opposite. Maybe even so far as to say they didn't learn much of anything. They really should be doing this grade level again because they just missed it all. And then what do? Because not only are you up against philosophical problems, the parents, my kid got the A's. On your side, yeah, but they didn't learn anything. You've got policy within your district, I'm sure. If you pass so many courses, you get to move on. And then you've got even state and federal rules that say very similar things, right? So we're in a real bind now. This pandemic has sort of caused a super problem. Kids are at home. Parents are helping them get good grades. They're not learning the content. We've got policies, history, and even some laws that say, look, you got to move them on. So how do we combat all of that? What do we do to get a situation turned upside down so that we're doing what's best for the kids? And then it becomes a financial problem too then, right? Oh my gosh, I've got more retentions than I ever did. Now I've got more kids in this grade level coming up and less kids moving ahead and staffing, and oh boy, what a mess, right? My theory is, and will always be, we always have to keep the kids in mind. Forget policies. Maybe even forget some of the laws if we can get them turned upside down. In the end, I think we can all at least rest easy and have a clear conscience if whatever we're doing, the decisions are based on what that kid needs in the end. Maybe it's retention. Maybe they just have to do it over again. Maybe you're going to have that very difficult conversation with that parent and say, wow, I really understand why you did this, but it didn't help the child learn. We're going to have to do this again. If we move them on, we know as educators the devastating effects that's going to cause. Well, I don't know about you, but I am not looking forward to those conversations, but I know they're coming, and I know we're going to have them. And I'm hoping platforms like this podcast, where we can also comment and communicate back and forth with each other, will give us a space to discuss these things. Maybe somewhere out there you found something that works. Share it. That's the one thing we have to keep in mind, is we've got to take care of each other. If somebody has a good idea out there, don't keep a hold of it. Help us out. We're all in this. We're all living through this pandemic. In the end, let's find ways to better education, better our system, and do what's right for our kids. That's certainly the key to everything here, right? That's why we're in this job, because we want to do best by those children. So in the end, good luck. I'm going to give you my email address. My email address is rob@robfurman.com. You're always more than welcome to reach out to me with comments, questions, ideas, thoughts. If you'd like to be a guest on this show and have a conversation on an interesting topic, feel free to email me, and let's have a conversation about how to make that happen. And thank you so much for listening to the Post-Apocalyptic Classroom.